Home prices are crashing if you're saving in Bitcoin. And in this video, I want to talk to you more about why I think this is happening and why I think it'll continue to happen. Let's get started. This website, priced in Bitcoin 21, I believe updates only once a day, and they have a metric for United States median new house. So for the longest time, this price has been above 6 Bitcoin. And over the last few days, over the last maybe week, the price dropped below 5 Bitcoin. We can see here the previous all-time low was about 6.41 Bitcoin. Today it's below 5 Bitcoin. I think this number is going to continue to drop. It's going to drop to 4 Bitcoin, then 3 Bitcoin, 2 Bitcoin, 1 Bitcoin. It'll eventually go to 0.1 Bitcoin, then 0.01 Bitcoin, because that's all that people will be able to afford to pay for a house. I've made other videos about this, but I don't think that mortgages and consumer debt is going to be common on a Bitcoin standard. I think most people are going to be saving to buy a house. Most people are going to be saving to buy a car. Most people are going to be saving to buy everything they want in terms of Bitcoin. They're not going to be borrowing money because it won't be worth it for the lender to lend them that money. So what does this mean? It means that the price of housing is going to drop significantly. Today, the value of houses is massively inflated because anyone can borrow as much money as they want to. Banks can print money out of thin air and lend it to anyone that they want to. And the people who can borrow this money can just dump all of it into a house. And there's really no connection to reality when you price houses at this point. I think right now the price of housing is just speculative, purely speculative. It's purely just a guess based on people thinking that, oh, house prices will continue to rise forever. And of course, this reflects in the price of Bitcoin. I think that a lot of the money that's currently going into housing is going to switch over to Bitcoin. I think it's going to move from flowing into real estate into Bitcoin because Bitcoin is a much better store of value. Again, I've made other videos explaining this, but the point here is that more and more people are going to move away from housing and they're going to move to Bitcoin to save for the future. And of course, because of this, the price of a house is going to drop in terms of Bitcoin because most people will never be able to afford more than 0.01 Bitcoin. I'm going to show you some numbers here. I'm going to switch over to a spreadsheet. So if you need to lower your brightness, do it now. So just to give you some background on this, why I think the price of a house is going to drop significantly, I want to show you some numbers. You can see here, 1 Bitcoin is the equivalent of 100 million Satoshis. So each Bitcoin can be split into 100 million units called Satoshis. There are 2.1 quadrillion Satoshis. The total supply of Bitcoin is 21 million. There's only going to be 21 million Bitcoin that exist. There's not going to be more than 21 million. But on top of that, there are about 3 to 5 million Bitcoin that are lost. But for the purposes of this spreadsheet, we'll go with 4 million. The total circulating supply of Bitcoin in 2024 is about 19.78 million. And in 2050, it'll be 20.984 million. And let me show you how I got these numbers. I created this spreadsheet that just shows you how much Bitcoin is being produced, how much the total supply is at a certain point in the Bitcoin's lifestyle cycle. So you can see here on November 28th, 2012, the total amount of Bitcoin that was in circulating supply was 10.5 million. 2016, July 9th, 2016, it was 15.75 million. 2028, it'll be at some point in 2028, I believe earlier than April 2028, it'll be 20.3 million. In 2048, it'll be 20.98 million, and 2052, it'll be 20.989 million. So I just picked a number in between, so in the middle of these two numbers. So let's go back to the spreadsheet here. We can see here that there's a total population on Earth of 8 billion people. The estimated population in 2050, this is a United Nations estimate, is about 9.7 billion. And I just did some calculations here. So in 2024, if the amount of people that adopt Bitcoin is 25%, this is the amount of Bitcoin that they could get. This is the amount of Satoshis that they could get. If it's 50%, 75%, 100%. So if 25% of people adopt Bitcoin and the total supply of Bitcoin is 21 million, this is not considering lost coins. The total amount of Bitcoin that each person could get, so 2 billion people adopt Bitcoin, total amount of Bitcoin of Satoshis that each person could get is about 989,000. If we consider the lost coins, 4 million coins are lost, it'll be 789,000 Satoshis in 2024 with 25% adoption. With 50% adoption with 21 million Bitcoin, there will be 494,500 Satoshis per person. If we consider the lost coins, 394,500. If we have 75% adoption with 21 million Bitcoin, 329,667 Satoshis will be allocated per person. If we consider lost coins again, 263,000, 100%, 247,000 Satoshis or 197,000 Satoshis. In 2050, these numbers are going to be slightly lower. Even though there's a little bit more Bitcoin, the population growth will have been quicker than the amount of Bitcoin supply growth. So we can see here, 21 million Bitcoin, 865,000 Satoshis per person. So keep in mind that this number is based on this. So instead of 2 billion people adopting Bitcoin, it would be about 2.5 billion. So if we go to 50%, we can see here, 432,000 Satoshis per person, 75%, 288,000 Satoshis per person, 100%, 216,000 Satoshis per person. But then if we consider the lost coins, it's going to be even lower. But something else that we have to consider is that a lot of Bitcoin is held by massive players. So if we go to this website, bitcointreasuries.net, we can actually see the institutional investors in Bitcoin, the people who own Bitcoin as institutions. So we can see here, MicroStrategy owns 280,000 Bitcoin, Marathon 26,000, Riot 11,000, Tesla 10,000, and so on. We can see here all the companies that own Bitcoin. I think some of these are global. So in total, just the public companies, these are public companies. So just the public companies own 391,000 Bitcoin. If we go to ETFs and other ETFs and funds, so we can see here BlackRock, Grayscale, Fidelity, all of these own 1.2 million Bitcoin. So these ETFs are owning Bitcoin for their customers. If we look at DeFi and smart contracts, 159,000 Bitcoin. Private companies own another 410,000 Bitcoin. Governments own another 524,000 Bitcoin. 2.682 million Bitcoin is already held by a very small group of entities. So in total, I believe there's 133 entities here. And these 130 entities own more than 10% of the supply, 2.6 million Bitcoin. So what this means is that the individual person who wants to buy Bitcoin won't even be able to afford the numbers that I was referring to before. So let's say if you split it between everybody in the world and you can say 100% adoption and each person can get 250,000 Satoshis, they won't even be able to get that because people like Michael Saylor, people who are early, people who have actually figured this out before the crowd, they own significantly more Bitcoin than anyone will ever be able to afford. And you can't stop them from owning this Bitcoin. You can't do anything. Once people figure out what Bitcoin is, they want as much as they possibly can get. And if you're late to the party, you're going to have a lot less than everyone else. The amount of Bitcoin that each individual has is based on how early they are to adopt Bitcoin. And again, this is one of the reasons why MicroStrategy is currently valued at such a high price. It's because they own an amount of Bitcoin that most people will never be able to achieve. Most countries will never be able to achieve 280,000 Bitcoin. So to MicroStrategy's investors, this is a competitive advantage. They own so much Bitcoin and they will definitely have a big part in the future of Bitcoin. So let's go back to this spreadsheet. We know for a fact that these numbers are going to be a lot lower because the people who own Bitcoin today very likely won't sell. Maybe they'll borrow against it. Maybe they'll borrow fiat currencies against it. So these numbers are going to be way lower than these estimates here. I think 175,000 Satoshis will be an extremely wealthy person. An extremely wealthy person will own 175,000 Satoshis all at once. Most people will never have this much Bitcoin in their wallets all at once. So now if we consider that most people won't have more than 100,000, 200,000, 300,000 Satoshis, why is it that the price of a house will stay at 4.87 Bitcoin? I don't think it'll stay this high for a very long time. The total amount of houses, I had to do some research to find this number, the total supply of houses in the world is 2.4 billion. The total supply of US homes is 150 million. The median house in the US is 4.87 Bitcoin. The total market cap of houses in just the US alone, in terms of Bitcoin, is 730.5 million Bitcoin. This is 35 times the number of Bitcoin that will ever exist. So this is significantly overvalued. I think that this number is going to drop significantly. Number one, like I said, people won't be able to take loans to buy houses, so they won't be able to borrow money that's created out of thin air. They won't be able to bring their future consumption to the present, meaning that this number is going to have to drop. So just that alone is going to pop the entire fiat currency, real estate, housing bubble. And what I think is going to happen is the very wealthy people are going to figure out that this is happening. So they're going to dump their houses. Let's say BlackRock, Blackstone, all these investment companies, they're going to get rid of all of the single family homes that they have, all of the residential real estate that they have. We're going to see a massive supply increase in terms of housing. The people who want to buy houses, their demand is going to be fulfilled. And what's going to happen if there's more houses left than the number of people who want to buy houses? Price of housing is going to keep dropping and dropping and dropping because everyone's going to want to hold Bitcoin and they're not going to want to hold housing. They're not going to want to hold more housing than they need. I personally know people today that own tens, hundreds of houses. There are people out there who own thousands of houses. There are people out there who have their entire life and they have entire businesses just based on owning houses and renting them to other people. And the only reason why these businesses even survive is because it's expected that the price of housing will continue to rise forever. So now if we consider the amount of Bitcoin that exists and the amount of houses that exist, if we just, I know this is probably not the right way to do it because the price of housing is determined at the margin. I actually think it'll be lower than this because there's going to be no loans. People aren't going to be able to borrow money to buy a house. So I think the price is going to go lower than this. I know this is probably not the right way. This is just a rough number here. If we divide 21 million Bitcoin by 2.4 billion houses, we get 0.00657 Bitcoin per house. That's the price of a house in the entire world. Right now, there are already houses that are below 1 Bitcoin overall in the world, but I think the biggest hit will be the cost of houses in the US. Right now, like I said, the price of a house is 4.87 Bitcoin. Okay, so now let's calculate the price of a house. These are very rough numbers. It's just 21 million divided by the total number of houses in the world. 0.00657 Bitcoin per house. That's the price of a house when we consider the total supply divided by 2.4 billion houses. If we consider the price of a house in the US, if we divide 21 million Bitcoin by 150 million houses, just that alone would be about 0.1 Bitcoin per house. But keep in mind, again, the US isn't the only market. Houses are all around the world. Also, housing isn't the only market. There are cars, there's food, there's all the things that we need to survive. Money has to be allocated to those things as well. So because of this, people aren't going to be willing to pay all of their savings for a house. If we consider that most people will never have more than 100,000 Satoshis, just based on who holds Bitcoin right now, how much Bitcoin they hold, most people will never have over 100,000 Satoshis. What that means is that the price of a house is going to be way lower than these numbers right here. We also have to consider that the price of housing is going to drop because it becomes easier to build houses with technology. So over time, we get better at making houses. More and more houses enter the economy. We have 3D printed houses, for example. We're going to have prefabricated homes that are built in factories, and all you need to do is buy a piece of land and you can construct a home on that land within a few days even. I actually feel like instead of people Airbnb units of, let's say, condos, people are going to Airbnb land and they're going to build properties on that land. Maybe we'll have some form of disposable homes. I mean, keep in mind that this is so abstract. I don't even know if this is possible. This is just an estimate. This is just where my mind goes when I try to think about how the price of housing is going to drop. And all of this just tells me that the price of housing is going to drop way lower than where it is today. Right now, you're paying 4.57 Bitcoin per house. All of the baby boomers are going to want to get rid of their houses, the extra houses that they have, because they're going to see the price of housing drop. All of the real estate investors are going to want to sell their houses because they're going to notice that housing is not a scarce commodity. Instead of buying houses, you can buy Bitcoin and you can have much better returns. Today, people use housing as a business. They buy as many houses as they can. They hoard all these houses, then they rent them out to other people. They can basically just hold on to these houses and they can extort other people in a way. They can basically say to anyone, I own this house, and if you can't afford to pay the rent that I want for this house, you get to be homeless. And the people who need a house, the people who can't afford a house, they can't pay for a house up front, they're forced to pay for the house, whatever the rental amount is that the landlord wants. It could be 40, 50, 60% of their income. They're forced to pay it to avoid being homeless. And if we look at all the costs that come with owning a house, we can see here there's maintenance, repairs, property taxes, vacancies, insurance, mortgage, property management, realtors. You have to pay interest on this mortgage. So a lot of the money that you're putting into this house is just disappearing and you're never going to get it back. So Why would you want to hold something that costs so much to own? I think when the world does go to a Bitcoin standard, houses are going to be seen as a liability. They're not going to be seen as an asset anymore because of all of these costs that are associated with owning a house. If you're only making, let's say, 3 to 5% in cash flows, and you're expecting your property value to go up over time, but it doesn't, you lose. Owning this rental portfolio isn't worth it anymore because you spend so much money just maintaining your portfolio and you really get nothing out of it. It's not like you're benefiting from it because you still have to continue to work. You still have to continue to put in the time and effort to maintain this property. You don't get freedom at all. When on the other hand, if you were to just buy Bitcoin, you can get 30, 40, 50% returns each year. You could hold on to this Bitcoin in your own wallet. You don't have to worry about the property burning down. You don't have to worry about uh, your government knocking on your door and taking your property away from you because you can't afford property taxes. None of that is considered when you own Bitcoin. So with Bitcoin, not only do you not have to deal with all of these headaches that come with real estate, you also get much higher returns. So why would the wealthiest people in the world want to own real estate anymore? There's no point. There is absolutely no point of owning real estate when Bitcoin exists. And over time, like I said, the smart real estate investors are going to figure this out earlier than everyone else. They're going to dump the properties that they have. They're going to get rid of all of the properties that they have. They're going to anticipate that the price of a house is going to drop below 1 Bitcoin, and they're going to make it a reality by dumping the properties that they have. As usual, retail investors are going to be the last to react to this. They're not going to figure it out until it's way too late. The price of a house is going to drop below 1 Bitcoin by the time they realize it. It's going to drop below 0.1 Bitcoin by the time they realize it. And this tweet that I posted really proves to me that what I think is true. I said the price of housing is crashing in terms of Bitcoin. The price of a house in US dollars is down to 4.87 BTC, a new low. And I got this response here. We can see it's the winter months. Houses lose value around this time because of less people moving. It picks back up during the summer and early fall months. You don't know real estate. I think this is the sentiment for most real estate investors. This person, Rob, is not the only person who thinks this way. I responded to them. The price of a house was 22.99 Bitcoin in November 2022. And his response was, Bitcoin is on a rally. Of course, this will happen. You need to study investing. You don't need to invest when Bitcoin exists. You don't need to buy real estate properties when Bitcoin is the alternative, when you can just save. Why would you want to buy real estate? So we can see here, I just responded to them. Why invest in real estate when I can just save in Bitcoin and get way better returns? I think the main thing here is that most retail real estate investors are emotionally attached to real estate. And this is what's going to hurt them the most. They're going to buy as much real estate as they can. They're going to buy as much as they can possibly afford. And they're going to continue buying, even when the price is dropping like a knife. Most retail investors are not aware of what's happening in the global macroeconomic environment. And this is what's going to hurt them the most. They don't realize that the world is moving away from US dollars. US dollars are created out of thin air. US dollars are being used to steal from pretty much everybody in the world. And this is something that most people don't want to deal with. Why would you want to hold on to a currency that's constantly losing value when you can hold something like Bitcoin, when you don't have to hold real estate anymore, when you don't have to hold stocks anymore? Most people can't respond to this. Most people don't have an answer to this. And this is why I think price of housing is going to drop. It's going to drop significantly. It's going to continue to drop for a very long time. It's going to drop to below 1 Bitcoin, below 0.1 Bitcoin. I think it's going to drop below 100,000 Satoshis. And if you're watching this video, you're extremely early. Keep studying Bitcoin. I think if you keep studying Bitcoin, if you watch all the videos that I make, if you try to look at it from my perspective, I think you're going to come to the same conclusion as me. Real estate is not a smart investment anymore. Real estate is a liability. The price of housing is going to drop significantly. It's going to drop below 1 Bitcoin.